We've been asked to build a bookshelf and changing table combination for our church's nursery. The church is under a little bit of a budget, so we've been given the challenge to build as good of a looking project as we can with as few materials as possible. And we're going to use 3 sheets of plywood and some trim boards to do the project. For our 3-sheet design, we've decided to use a 1/2 inch plywood for the backs and 3/4 inch for the carcasses. The width of the changing table is going to be a shelf length of 36 inches. That gives us longer on the top. The width of the shelves for the case on the right of that are going to be 32 inches. That enables us to get 3 shelf lengths out of 1 sheet of plywood length for the right shelving. On the plywood back, we have the 38 inch tall changing table that's all the way up to the top shelf level. But we're going to be putting a 4-inch toe kick at the bottom, so that our back only needs to go down to the bottom of that board. So it'll be the 38 minus 3¼ inches for a height of 34 3/4 inches for the back on that piece. That leaves us about 61 3/4 inch remaining for the back of the other piece, which is perfect the way things have worked out in our plans. This is the 33½ inch wide for the backs that are 32 inches, plus the width of the outside of the carcass brings it to 33½. I've got my line drawn, and I'll add my razor blades. Line this up just to where it touches the blades on both marks. Clamp it in. I need to make sure that my saw is on the correct side of the cut. The kerf is going to be on this side of my mark, and this will give me an exact 33½ inches. Chip breaker is all the way down to my board, so that keeps everything nice. I've installed a tape measure on my Fest table, my MFT3, that has both metric and English measurements on it, so it makes it really easy for me to get a repeated distance of my length of board and know exactly what that should be. In this case, I'm after 32 inches for each of my 15-inch deep shelves. So I can just take the flip stop and put it down right at lining up the inside edge on the 32-inch mark. Lock it into place, and it'll repeat the exact same length of board. Right at 3 feet. We're going to be using the domino to join our shelving units to the sides of the case. When we plunge into the side, we've got a problem because it doesn't match up with a 3/4 inch plywood. So to solve this issue, because we have the larger domino rather than the small one, we're going to be elevating our plywood shelves as we plunge into them on a piece of roughly 1/4 inch plywood. That'll bring the center up more in line with the center of the mortise that gets plunged by the domino. And then to offset that on the sides, I've marked with a marking knife where I want the bottom of the shelf and spaced my aluminum extrusion down by the spacer distance, that 1/4 inch plywood distance, to be able to register the domino off of that. So I'm going to be plunging those in. I've got it clamped down. I have a 6mm bit inserted in the domino. In order to do that with the larger domino, Seneca makes a domino cutter adapter for the larger one, and that allows us to put a smaller bit on and extends it so that the measurement works correctly for the plunge depth. I'm going to be using these 6x40s, so I'm plunging in 15mm deep on the sides. To ensure that I line everything up correctly, I'm going to be using, the domino has these nice reference buttons on either side, but I'm going to be using the first button to reference, which is going to put it about 5 centimeters in for the first center of the first domino. It's close to 2 inches. From there, I'm going to go at 4 inches in from the edge, and I'll just reference that from the hole, and I'll show you how that works. These wings are little extensions that you can add on. They clip in and out pretty easy. You have to move this away, but it's just a lever you turn over and it slides right down into a sort of a dovetail joint there, and that can go on either side. I'm going to be referencing everything from the back edge of the case towards the front, and I'll do the same thing when I get to my shelving units. I'll start on the back edge using the same spacing, referencing against the edge here. If this was my shelf and this is the back edge of the shelf, I would simply reference this button against the edge, plunge my first mortise, and then use this next button that I've preset to plunge in the center based on the edge of the first mortise that I plunge. This is the opposite side, so this is the back, this would be the front edge, and on that one I need the opposite setup. So I'll be using the left wing pin for my spacing in between, and this opposite pin to space from the outside edge. This piece happens to be the right side of the tall cabinet, and it has quite a flaw in it that I really don't want to show if I can avoid it. It also has another problem at the bottom where there's a big knot that I'd also like to hide. So I'm going to face this to the outside wall where it will never be seen, and put the good side to the inside of my cabinet for this particular piece. Now my other tall piece, I'm looking at the inside of having a blemish here. I'd like this to be the back side, so that's definitely going to be the back side of the left side of the cabinet, and that works out pretty well because that puts this blemish that's on the front side where it's hidden by the lower cabinet. For the fixed bottom shelf on both the left and the right cabinet, I've decided I want those shelves to be fixed at 16 inches of a gap. I do have an inch or a quarter of an inch overhang on the shelf from the front edge facing to the bottom of the shelf, so I have to take that into account. But the space that I want is essentially the 16 plus the 4 inches from the bottom of the cabinet, so 20 inches up. So I've marked where the bottom edge of the front of my shelf is going to come. Because I have a quarter of an inch overhang and I'm using a 1/4 inch thick plywood to do the offset, it's going to come up pretty close if I just set that at 20 inches up from the bottom will give me a 16-inch gap between the two shelves. The top gap is going to come out right at about 12 inches with a little bit of overhang on the top. Getting ready to plunge the mortises into the ends of my shelf units. They're all pretty much done the same way, using the same setup as I did for the sides. And I'm always going to start from the back with the same settings: tight, loose, loose, and loose. And I've got my board raised up by my 1/4 of an inch riser that I've already accounted for in the setting of the height of the shelves over there. And I just realized that my depth is still set at 15, and I needed, because I'm using the 40 dominoes, 15 is 25. So I need to change this setting over here down to 25 for the depth. So 25 deep plus 15 is 40. So I have to redo these.